Here we go. December 17th at 9 something in the morning. Harriet Goodman. Number 1, what was your inspiration behind her compositional works, if any?
I don't know that there was any inspiration. It was just, I was very close to my mother and father. And my father earned his living by being a professional musician. He played the violin and the viola, and he taught himself other instruments. So I grew up in a musical household. My mother liked opera and light opera, so I heard music a lot as a child. And I just wanted to do something for my dad. It was a birthday present for him. So that's when I wrote some of that. I just sat down and did it. I didn't have a particular inspiration, just something I wanted to do for my parents.
Okay. Were there any particular favorite composers you liked more than others?
Well, I was born in 1931, so you can gauge what the musical era was when I grew up. Studying piano in those days was all classical piano.
But the question is, did you like a composer more than another?
Not that I can recall.
So there weren't like favorite composers you had?
Well, of course, the usual ones. I always liked Antonin Dvorak. He's still one of my favorite composers. And when KUNI plays his music, I sit up and listen. And my husband and I actually went to Spillville and saw where he lived, where he wrote his symphony. So that was more not so much from my childhood, but from my adulthood. But as a child, no, I don't recall that.
Okay. And did you play any instruments growing up?
Yes, I studied piano starting at 8. My father was a violinist, and he wanted me to study the violin, but it wasn't for me. I wanted to study the piano. I think he thought every other kid plays the piano, and he'd like me to do something different, but that's what I wanted to do. So we bought an old Schmuller & Mueller piano for $50, and I started lessons.
Okay. And how did you cultivate an interest in composition?
I really don't know. I don't know how to answer that. It's just something I decided to do. My father was having a birthday, and I decided that it would be nice if I did something for his birthday, and what could I do for my dad? So I wrote that violin and piano sonata or something. And then I wrote some stuff for my mother. It just sort of kept going at that point in my life.
Okay. And a lot of composers gain inspiration from choral hymns. Were there any choral hymns in particular that you hold dear to yourself?
No, not that I recall. Oh, going back to your previous question, though, when I was in my late teens, I started studying with Castelnuovo Tedesco, and so my musical notation probably dates from some of that, because I was very precise and very careful in writing the notes. But no, choral music wasn't a part of my life growing up. We didn't attend a church, and although as an adult, my mother and I got to hear a performance of the Bach Diviner Mass when we were growing up and visiting California. Someone took us to the church where they were performing it. But the answer is no, it wasn't part of my musical background.
How was music influential in your daily life?
Well, of course, since I studied the piano until I became a freshman at UCLA.
How old were you when you started studying piano?
8. I was 8 years old, and I studied till I was 17. So I had music all the time. Now, I grew up in a musical home. I was fortunate. My father played the violin and the viola. He played, I grew up in New York until I was 9, then we moved to Los Angeles. He played in a lot of the major orchestras, Tommy Dorsey, a lot of those things. He did a lot of, in California, he played a lot of show tunes, Annie Get Your Gun. My mom and I went to all the operas and operettas that my dad was in the orchestra. So I had music in my growing up. It was just part of my life. And as a result, as an adult, I have retained an interest and a love for music, mostly classical music. And that remains with me to this day. I have my radio on KUNI, and I've gotten to meet Jacqueline Hallblum and some of the people that work there. And that's just something I enjoy every day, is that's part of my background.
Is there anything else that you feel important to talk about regarding your music?
My parents always encouraged me, and I don't remember when I wrote these pieces.
You were 16.
I was 16, yeah.
So, tell us more about Papa. Did he play in the silent movies in the pit?
No, he did not. He played, once we got to California, my mother worked at Universal Studios. He was in the studio orchestra, and he was in the Hollywood Bowl Symphony. He played on a lot of the television programs. He did the Ozzie Nelson and Harriet Nelson television show. He worked for Xavier Cugat and Jimmy Durante. He knew a lot of these people because of his job. So I grew up knowing about them and sometimes meeting them because of his work. But my dad would practice. I remember my father was giving violin lessons to a neighbor's girl, and every time I walked, I was in high school then, I think. Every time I walked home from school, I heard her playing the notes that weren't written, and I cringed a little bit. But my father was very gentle, and finally he realized the violin was not for her, so that ended that. But
so what else did Papa play at Universal Studios?
Basically the violin and the viola.
But I mean, what shows?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if these were shows from the studio or just. He did a lot of television. Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, Ricky Nelson's parents, had their own show. He played that. Jimmy Durante had a show. He played that. He did a lot of that sort of thing. And I remember one of the shows he was on was sponsored in those days by Camel cigarettes, and some of the musicians from the orchestra were actually on TV, and they had to sing the song CAMELS, and there was my dad on the screen with a couple of the other orchestra members singing the ad, which paid for the show, Camel cigarettes. But he knew a lot of people. I think he played with some of the Tommy Dorsey, and some of the Benny Goodman things when I was young. But that was his life, and my mother was very involved in it. And then when he played a lot of the light operas, I saw Mary Martin in Annie Get Your Gun. I saw Yul Brynner in The King and I, because my dad was in the pit orchestra, and so my mom and I were in the audience. So I saw a lot of these things, a lot of names that young people today wouldn't even know, but that was in my background. I just took it for granted that we went to all these things. And then when I later ushered as an adult here in Iowa at the Gallagher Blue Dorn, they played some of these shows, and my husband and I went, and of course I'd seen them as a young person growing up through my mother's work and my dad's work.
And so how old were you when you first started playing a musical instrument?
I was 8 years old.
And you were playing piano?
Yes.
Who taught you?
My father got a teacher for me.
Oh, okay. Did you like it right away?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. They wanted me to do the violin, as I said. I said, no, I want the piano. And then later, in my early teens, 14, 15, 16, my father decided it would be good for me to have a more well-rounded musical education. And that's when I became a student of Mario Castronuevo Tedesco. And although Tedesco is not in the first or second tier ranked, in those days he did a lot of studio music work for Universal Studios and other ones. And some of the corrections on my music are probably his, because there was one of the music scores that I did that was my assignment from Mr. Tedesco. I had to take a movement of a Kuhlau. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He wrote a lot of piano sonatas, piano work, and score it for string orchestra. And so that was one of the assignments I had, that you have the music to. And I studied with Tedesco, and to this day, I get really happy when I hear something that he wrote a lot of guitar music, and it's for his guitar music is played quite a bit today. Once in a while I hear it on the radio and I think, oh boy, that takes me back.
Is there anything else that you would like to share about music in your life?
Well, I'm a great believer in the arts, and whatever it is, dance, music, poetry, whatever, I think people need that sort of thing to add enrichment to their lives. And I was fortunate to grow up in a household where music was important. And even though I basically studied classical music, I did the Schumann concerto, the whole bit. Nevertheless, I played Debussy and I played Hindemith sonata. So as my background as a piano student was fairly well rounded, but I think that interest in that particular form of the arts has stayed with me my whole life. And
who was your favorite musical teacher?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with Howard and Ellen Jones. Howard Jones was very instrumental in getting the fine arts going at the Gallagher. But his wife, Ellen, and this is in Cedar Falls, was a renowned piano teacher, and I studied for several years with her.
Okay.
In fact, she was my last teacher, Ellen Jones.
Anything else that you would like to share?
No, just to thank you for your interest in this, and my kids are very excited that Mom did this, and I kept telling them it's no big deal. Mozart wrote a lot more when he was 9 years old, but my daughter would say, well, you're not Mozart. True.
You are Mozart. You're better.
I'm the Mozart of the family.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much.